Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're tearing down the mechanics of anxiety, resetting that hijacked dopamine of yours, and getting your focus back on track using actual science-backed protocols. Here's the roadmap. We'll be covering the overthinking epidemic, hijacks dopamine, mastering your worry, grounding techniques, the biology of walking, and finally, how to take back control. Let's jump right in.
Part 1, the overthinking epidemic, and why your brain feels totally stuck. Okay, be honest. You've definitely asked yourself this late at night. How on earth can you effortlessly scroll on your phone for 3 solid hours, but the second you sit down to study or do deep work for just 15 minutes, it feels like actual torture? Seriously. Well, you can stop beating yourself up right now. It's not because you're lazy or undisciplined. It is a completely mechanical, biological process happening right inside your head. It all comes down to a specific piece of hardware in your brain called the ventral striatum. Think of it as your brain's built-in seeking system. Evolutionarily speaking, this system was designed to keep us exploring, pushing the boundaries of what we know. It literally craves novelty. So when you open up a short-form video app, oh man, it is an absolute feast for this system. Every single swipe hands your brain a new joke, a new fact, a new image. It's getting exactly what it's wired to seek, endlessly, with absolutely zero effort. And because of this constant hunger for new stuff, we get trapped in what we call paralysis by analysis. We over-research, we over-prepare, and we never actually start the task. But here's a crazy stat for you. Studies show that simply cutting down your planning time can actually boost your productivity by 60%. 60%. So the takeaway here? Your brain is always going to want more information, but you have to actively cut that off and just force yourself into action. Which brings us to part 2. Hijack dopamine and motivation. Let's recalibrate that scale. Here's the harsh reality. Your dopamine system has been completely hijacked. It's basically turned your brain into a heat-seeking missile for instant pleasure. Just look at the stark contrast here. When your dopamine baseline is sky-high from endless scrolling, your brain expects an effortless, instant reward every couple of seconds. Naturally, when you finally sit down with a textbook or a hard project, it registers at the absolute bottom of your pleasure scale. Deep work is slow, right? It demands heavy focus and massive effort before you get any sort of reward. Compared to your phone, it's just a dopamine desert. So how do we fix this? You've got to deliberately lower that baseline with a mini dopamine detox. This literally means practicing 15 minutes of complete boredom every single day. Just stare at a wall, no phone, no music, nothing. Yeah, it's going to feel excruciating at first, but it starves your brain of constant stimulation so that smaller rewards actually start feeling good again. Once you do sit down to work, break your tasks into tiny chunks using the Pomodoro technique. 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. After each chunk, physically check a box or draw a star. It sounds almost too simple, but that physical act of completion gives your brain the exact finite, conquerable dopamine hit it needs to keep going. Moving on to part 3, mastering your worry habit and breaking the loop. Right, so what happens when you sit down to focus, but your brain just floods with catastrophic anxiety? You can't just power through that. You have to realize that worry is basically just a mutated form of problem solving. There's this incredible quote from Noah Thomas. "I could not control what I was thinking at all. They were just thoughts." That mindset is so incredibly freeing. Your brain is just a word machine generating random scenarios to try and keep you safe. Those thoughts don't define you, and you have zero control over them popping up. So stop judging yourself for having them. They are literally just thoughts. To stop that worry from bleeding into your entire day, you need to use a technique called scheduled worry. Pick a consistent time, let's say 6 p.m. Sit down and write out all your worries for exactly 15 minutes. Get them on paper and make them concrete. Then, when the timer rings, step away and redirect your focus. If a worry pops up earlier at, say, 2 p.m., you just tell your brain, "Hey, thanks for the heads up. We're going to process that at 6 p.m. You are literally training your brain like a muscle, putting firm boundaries on when and where it's allowed to dwell on fear. Part 4. Grounding your nervous system. Time to find the biological brake pedal. Now, when anxiety triggers an actual physical panic response, we have to look at the underlying biology. When you panic, your nervous system gets stuck in sympathetic dominance. That's your fight, flight, or freeze mode. Cortisol spikes, and your body essentially thinks it's going to war. You can't just think happy thoughts to get out of this. You have to actively, mechanically trigger your parasympathetic system. That is your rest and digest mode, the actual biological home of calm, resolve, and restoration. And you can force this shift using a really effective 5 senses grounding technique. When panic hits, look around and name 3 things you can physically see.
Then touch 3 things and really describe their texture to yourself, like, this desk feels cold and smooth. Finally, listen for 3 distinct sounds. By anchoring yourself deeply in your physical senses, you send an immediate, undeniable signal to your brain that your current environment is completely safe. It acts like a switch, literally shutting off the flow of stress hormones. But hey, if your mind is still racing, here's a mind-blowing psychological hack derived from EMDR therapy. Did you know your brain actually requires physical eye movement to effectively recall memories and process racing thoughts? It's totally true. So if you're stuck in a brutal anxiety loop, pick one single spot on the wall and keep your eyeballs completely locked onto it. By physically forcing your eyes to stay perfectly still, you stop the rumination dead in its tracks. You're basically depriving your brain of the very mechanism it uses to spin those thoughts.
Part 5. The biology of walking and moving toward mental clarity. We've hacked the mind, but one of the absolute best therapeutic interventions for your nervous system simply requires moving your body. Walking isn't just about burning a few extra calories, it's a massive biological reset. Even a simple 20-minute walk significantly lowers the cortisol that's keeping you stressed and flushes out lingering adrenaline. But it goes way deeper than that. It boosts the efficiency of your mitochondria, your cells' little energy factories, increases gut microbial diversity, creates antioxidants, and even boosts your natural killer cells that fight off viruses. And there's actually a huge misconception out there about exercise and breathing. When you do heavy, high-intensity workouts, you overbreathe. You flood your bloodstream with oxygen, but like a cup overflowing with water, it often results in really poor delivery to your actual tissues. Long walks, on the other hand, create the perfect biological balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide. That CO2 is absolutely essential because it transports and delivers the oxygen deep down into your cells and brain tissue. That is exactly why taking a walk is practically magic for boosting your creativity and problem-solving skills. Finally, Part 6. Taking back control. The manual for your mind.
Let's bring all these amazing tools together. Whether you're paralyzed by a massive study session or absolutely terrified of rejection, you've got to stop waiting for motivation to magically strike. Listen to this great quote from Dan Martell. "Rejection isn't failure. It's proof you had the courage to try. It's redirection towards something better. Fear is just false evidence appearing real. You can't wait for it to disappear. You have to take action in spite of it. Just showing up and executing the mechanics we've talked about is what actually creates the transformation."
Throughout this explainer, we've built a solid toolkit, tackling the overthinking epidemic, resetting that hijacked dopamine, mastering your worry, grounding your nervous system, leveraging the biology of walking, and finally, taking back control.
The literal mechanics of your brain and body are now entirely in your hands. So what's it going to be? Are you going to remain a passive hostage to your runaway thoughts and a fried dopamine system? Or will you use this manual to finally rewire your brain? Knowledge is just potential energy until you actually apply it. What single action will you take today to take back control? Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this, and I highly challenge you to go put just one of these tools into practice right now. Catch you next time.